There comes a moment, quiet and unannounced, when the world you once clung to shatters, like porcelain against the cold, marble floor of reality. You don't see it coming, not really. Perhaps it arrives in the form of a betrayal, a diagnosis, a phone call in the dead of night. Or maybe it's not a moment at all, but a slow erosion, a quiet undoing of everything you thought you were. What do you do when life doesn't just bruise you, but breaks you open? You're not just bent, you're broken wide, like a cracked seed forced into bloom beneath the weight of soil and silence. And here's the cruel paradox. You've spent your entire life trying to hold it all together. Your reputation, your relationships, your role in the grand theater of family and society. But now the very fabric of that identity is unraveling in your hands. Your cries echo into a silence, so deep it feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. You ask, why now? Why me? What have I done to deserve this? But what if you're asking the wrong question? What if life isn't punishing you, but initiating you? You see, there's a sacred violence to transformation, a necessary breaking, a tearing away of false layers so something truer can emerge. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And perhaps he understood something most of us are too terrified to confront. That your suffering might not be an interruption of your path, but the very gateway into it. What if your heartbreak isn't meant to harden you, but to hollow you, so that something vast and eternal can fill the space? There is something deeply disorienting about being broken open. It violates everything your ego has worked so hard to build: control, certainty, safety. Suddenly, you're plunged into the underworld of your own psyche, wandering the ruins of who you used to be. And in this liminal space between what was and what will be, you are utterly, terrifyingly exposed. But here's what they don't tell you, that this exposure is holy, because the soul doesn't awaken through comfort. It awakens through collapse. So the real question is not, how do I get back to who I was? But rather, who am I now that I've been undone? There is something alive inside you that cannot die, not even here, in this unbearable breaking. And if you have the courage to stay with it, to feel the unbearable grief without numbing, to face the internal storm without running, then something extraordinary can emerge. Not a return to your old self, but a birth into your real one. So now, standing in the ashes of everything you thought you needed, who are you becoming? And more importantly, are you willing to meet that version of yourself? When life breaks you open, the wound feels like the problem. The pain becomes the enemy. You're told to be strong, to get over it, to move on. But beneath the surface of your suffering lies a far deeper affliction. One that doesn't begin with your trauma, but with your conditioning. You were never taught how to fall apart with dignity. From childhood, you were fed a quiet, poisonous lie that your worth is tied to how intact you appear. That strength means suppressing vulnerability. That being whole means being unbreakable. But what if this illusion of strength is exactly what is keeping you from healing? You live in a culture obsessed with masks. Jung called this the persona, the false self you wear to survive the expectations of the world. It is the polished version of you, agreeable, productive, smiling on command. The you that gets applause. But behind that mask lies everything disowned. All the grief you've tucked under your ribs. All the rage you swallowed so you wouldn't be abandoned. All the fear you buried to be lovable. This buried material doesn't vanish. It becomes your shadow, and the shadow is patient. It waits for a fracture, a rupture in the persona, a death, a divorce, a breakdown, anything that tears a hole in your facade. And when that crack appears, the contents of your unconscious pour through. This is why collapse feels so terrifying, not just because life has changed, but because now you are forced to confront everything you were running from. You thought the pain was coming from the outside, but the real war is within. Society calls it a breakdown. Jung would call it the descent into the unconscious, a sacred journey, a confrontation with the repressed parts of yourself, what you were too ashamed to feel, too afraid to speak, too conditioned to question. In this descent, the rules no longer apply. Success loses its meaning. The affirmations don't work. The books on positivity feel hollow. Why? Because now, you're not being called to improve your life. You're being summoned to transform it, and transformation does not happen at the surface. It demands depth, Suffering paradoxically becomes the invitation. The modern world teaches you to bypass this, to numb the ache with distractions, achievements, even spirituality dressed up as self-escape. But Jung warned of this too. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You cannot rise if you do not first sink. This is the hidden problem. Your pain isn't the enemy. Your resistance to pain is. You are taught to fear your darkness when in truth, that darkness contains the medicine, the wisdom, the map back to your soul. Every ancient rite of passage included a descent. Every mythology tells of a hero who must journey into the underworld, face the monster and emerge transformed. In the West, we've forgotten this. We've pathologized suffering instead of sanctifying it. But the psyche still remembers. And when your life begins to fall apart, it is not punishing you. It is inviting you into that sacred myth. You are not failing. You are descending. And descent is not regression, it's initiation.
But not everyone answers the call. Some run, some numb, some rebuild the same mask, slightly altered, and some choose to face the void, to sit in the ruins, to let the fire burn away every illusion of control. These are the ones who awaken, not because they found the light, but because they finally stopped running from the dark. You must understand, individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, is not a gentle path. It is forged through rupture, through disillusionment, through the slow, sacred death of who you thought you were. And in that death, something ancient stirs. You do not awaken through victory, you awaken through surrender. So ask yourself now, what parts of you were never truly you? What identities have you clung to that are now burning away? What lies have you mistaken for love? And what if, just what if, your greatest wound was never meant to destroy you, but to deliver you? When life breaks you open and you refuse the descent, the suffering doesn't end, it deepens. You learn to smile through clenched teeth. You keep showing up to a life that no longer fits you, performing joy like an actor trapped in a fading script. The world applauds your resilience, but they don't see the quiet war behind your eyes. Because that's the paradox. The more you avoid your inner darkness, the more it begins to shape your outer reality. You become a ghost in your own life, haunted not by what happened, but by everything left unprocessed. You distract yourself with achievements, relationships, busyness. You accumulate validations like armor, but the wound still unattended festers. Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, it grows. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It grows louder, more cunning. It starts to leak into your choices, your relationships, your self-worth. You find yourself tolerating what you once swore you wouldn't, accepting scraps in the name of peace, numbing your intuition with logic, dimming your light so others won't feel threatened. You are no longer living. You are surviving in a performance of who you think you're supposed to be. And this is the tragedy. Many people mistake suppression for healing. They believe that if they don't talk about it, don't feel it, don't name it, it will vanish. But the unconscious is not that merciful. What remains unconscious rules your life from the shadows. And you will call it fate. You will say, why does this always happen to me? Without realizing that every repeated pattern is an echo of the unintegrated pain, screaming for acknowledgement. These are the unseen consequences. The way you settle for half love because full love would require vulnerability. The way you sabotage your peace because chaos is more familiar than calm. The way you push away real intimacy because it threatens the walls you've built. The way you fear solitude not because you're lonely, but because silence confronts you with yourself.
You start to lose yourself, not all at once, but piece by piece. You become overly agreeable, excessively responsible, constantly apologizing for your existence because it feels safer to disappear than to take up space. You smile when you want to scream. You say yes when your soul is begging you to say no. The longer you stay broken open but refuse to look inside, the more fragmented you become. And here lies another paradox. Wholeness requires breaking. But fragmentation happens when you refuse to be broken with awareness. When you numb the very process designed to reassemble you in truth. Even spirituality, when used as avoidance, becomes another mask. You meditate but only to escape thoughts, not to meet them. You repeat mantras, but never question the core wounds they attempt to cover. You chase good vibes only, but exile your rage, your grief, your longing. You call it peace. But it's not peace, it's suppression. True peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the full integration of it. And what about the body? The body keeps the score. Your body remembers every betrayal you refused to name, every boundary you didn't set, every time you chose silence when you should have roared. Your back aches under the weight of unspoken truth. Your chest tightens with the grief you've labeled as fine. Your jaw clenches with all the words you never said. And still you pretend. But pretending is expensive. It costs you your vitality, your creativity, your authenticity. Most of all, it costs you your connection to the self, that sacred, unshakable core within you that knows who you are beyond roles, beyond conditioning, beyond trauma. You think breaking is the end, but it's the refusal to break honestly that shatters you into pieces too scattered to recover. And so you wake up one day and wonder why everything feels numb, why nothing feels real, why you're surrounded by people but feel utterly alone, why even in moments of success your soul whispers, "This isn't it." This is the cry of the unintegrated self, not because you are weak, not because you are broken beyond repair, but because there is something inside of you, ancient, sacred, indestructible, that refuses to be buried any longer. So you have a choice. You can keep patching the cracks with distractions and pretending the house is still whole, or you can walk into the ruins, light a candle, and begin the slow, sacred process of remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget.
There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, but quietly seismic, when you realize no one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not the system, not the universe. And strangely, that moment doesn't destroy you. It liberates you. Because in the silence left behind by that realization, you hear something you hadn't heard in a long time, your own voice. Shaky, maybe. Wounded, yes. But real. Yours. This is the beginning of the rebellion. Not against the world. Not even against those who hurt you. But against the version of yourself you had to become just to survive. The mask wearer. The pleaser. The controller. The one who performed strength while secretly bleeding beneath the surface. You stop asking permission to exist. You begin to choose truth over comfort, even when that truth scorches everything around you. This rebellion doesn't come with banners or slogans. It happens in small, quiet acts of defiance. Telling someone no without explaining yourself. Admitting you're not okay without apologizing for it. Sitting in your grief and letting it baptize you, instead of rushing to move on. Leaving the room when the energy dishonors your spirit. Walking away from roles you were never meant to play. Do you realize healing isn't becoming someone new? It's unbecoming. What you never were. You stop romanticizing potential and start demanding reality. You stop rescuing people from the consequences of their own behavior. You stop calling dysfunction loyalty. You stop worshiping the altar of family, when it's a sanctuary of unhealed trauma. Because love without respect isn't love, it's manipulation. And connection without boundaries is bondage. You start asking terrifying questions. Who am I outside of their expectations? Who could I be if I didn't need to prove anything? What parts of me have I exiled just to be accepted? You go into the underworld not to suffer but to reclaim. You meet your inner child, the one who learned early that love is conditional. You meet your rage, the one you silenced to avoid being called too much. You meet your longing, the one you numbed, because it felt unbearable to want and not receive. You let them speak. You stop interrupting your own truth. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not palatable, whole. To become whole, you must walk into the very darkness you were taught to avoid, not to conquer it, not to slay dragons, but to listen, to witness, to integrate. This is the sacred alchemy. The pain you buried becomes the soil for your rebirth. The grief you feared becomes the doorway to joy that doesn't depend on others. The solitude you once resisted becomes your sanctuary. You start building a new inner architecture, a life built not on performance but presence, not on people-pleasing but purpose, not on avoidance but awareness. And no, it's not easy, because when you change, everything attached to your old identity begins to tremble. Friends who loved your silence will be startled by your voice. Family who depended on your compliance will accuse you of rebellion. Society will offer labels for what it cannot control. Selfish, cold, difficult, broken. But those are not your names. You do not exist to be understood. You exist to be true. And here's the paradox. The more true you become, the less approval you need. The more you listen to your soul, the less validation you seek. The more whole you are within, the less you chase wholeness in others. You realize peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the absence of pretending. So you let the old self die. You grieve her. You honor her. You thank her for getting you through what you weren't ready to face. But then, you let her go. Because something deeper is calling now. A self not shaped by trauma. A voice not borrowed. A love not begged for. You begin to trust yourself again. And in doing so, you reclaim your life from every person, pattern and lie that told you otherwise. This is your rebellion, your resurrection, your return. And it's just the beginning.
There is a silence that comes after the storm. Not the fragile quiet of denial, but a deep, sacred stillness, the kind that only follows transformation. You sit in the ashes of everything you were told to be, and for the first time you are not afraid. Because what you feared most, the breaking, the unraveling, the letting go, did not kill you. It revealed you beneath the masks, beneath the trauma, beneath the conditioning that said love must be earned and worth must be proven. Beneath it all was you, not the fragmented, scattered version, but the whole, the eternal, the self. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your mother needed you to be, not who the world applauded, not who your pain sculpted out of necessity, but who you were before the world got to you, before shame buried your voice, before survival taught you to shrink, before love became a transaction. You realize now the breaking wasn't punishment. It was initiation. Life didn't destroy you. It stripped you of illusions, of attachments, of false gods you mistook for home. It didn't take your power. It returned it to its rightful owner, you. But here's the paradox, the final, most unsettling truth. You had this power all along. You just needed life to break you open to remember. Not to crush you, but to crack the shell of performance. Not to ruin you, but to reveal you. Not to punish you, but to purify you. The self, your deepest truth, was never lost. It was waiting, in the silence, in the grief, in the moments you felt most abandoned. Because what you called abandonment was actually initiation. What you called loneliness was actually space. What you called failure was actually the doorway to freedom. No, the world may not understand this version of you. This version that no longer overextends to be chosen. This version that no longer tolerates dysfunction masked as love. This version that smiles less but feels more. But that's not your burden to carry. You weren't born to be palatable. You were born to be true. The truth is inconvenient. It disrupts. It offends. It dismantles everything false. But the truth also sets you free. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be remembered by yourself. And the most radical thing you can do in a world addicted to appearances is to be real. This is the ultimate awakening. Not enlightenment as escape, not healing as perfection, but presence. Radical, unapologetic presence. To be here fully, with your grief and your grace, your rage and your radiance, your shadows and your sacredness. To stop seeking salvation in others and to return home to the sanctuary within. The self isn't a destination. It's a remembering, and when you touch it, when you feel the power of your own soul humming beneath the noise of the world, you stop chasing what was never yours to begin with. You stop performing, you start living. And in that moment you realize, you are the miracle, not your healing, not your transformation. You broken open, stripped bare, more yourself than you've ever been. There is nothing more holy. So when life breaks you open again, and it will, you won't resist. You'll meet it like an old friend, not because you enjoy the pain, but because you now know what waits on the other side. Not ruin, but resurrection. Not loss, but liberation. Not the end, but the return. And so you rise, not to prove anything, not to please anyone, but because truth demands it. Because your soul remembers. Because you are no longer afraid of being you. The journey isn't over, but now you walk it awake, with eyes wide open, with your heart stitched together, not with perfection, but with presence. This is what it means to live after breaking. You don't become less. you become real, and the world has no defense against a person who is no longer hiding.